You dismiss it as biology, but deep down you know it costs you. It costs you presence. It costs you genuine connection. It costs you a deeper sense of self that feels just out of reach. What if I told you there's a path out of that constant seeking, a way to reclaim your power from the forces that have held you captive? Consider a man you've seen, perhaps in a crowded room. He's not shouting. He's not showing off. He doesn't demand attention, yet your eyes drift to him. Others feel it too. A quiet magnetic pull. His gaze doesn't flit across bodies, hungrily searching. It rests, steady and direct, on the person he's speaking with. His attention doesn't splinter. It remains wholly present, while others perform, chasing validation or dominance. He simply is. He occupies his own skin with a profound ease. Women respond to him differently. Their shoulders drop. Their guards fall away. They share vulnerabilities they rarely express. Not because he uses tactics, but precisely because he doesn't. His energy asks for nothing. His presence demands no performance. This man possesses something revolutionary. He has a desexualized mind. The unseen power of presence. This doesn't mean he's neutered. It doesn't mean he's repressed or powerless. Quite the opposite, in fact. It signifies a consciousness that has differentiated itself from the blind grip of sexual impulse. He feels desire, perhaps even more intensely than others. Yet he is no longer possessed by it. He is no longer unconsciously driven by it. Carl Jung, that towering figure of depth psychology, saw this distinction as utterly fundamental. He wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other." The desexualized mind doesn't eliminate power or desire. It integrates them consciously. It doesn't let them operate as unseen masters. Look around you. Everywhere you turn, messages scream for your attention. Billboards parade bodies to sell everything imaginable. Entertainment reduces women to mere visual consumption. Social media algorithms are engineered to feed on and amplify objectification. Society relentlessly bombards men with signals designed to keep them identified with lust. Their psychological energy is constantly siphoned into their lower centers. This isn't an accident. This isn't a coincidence. Unconscious men make ideal consumers. They follow predictable patterns. Their attention is easily captured. It can be monetized. Their insecurities are weaponized to sell products that promise the very power they've unknowingly given away. The system thrives on your unconsciousness. It profits from your blind identification. Jung foresaw this societal pattern decades before it reached today's fever pitch. In his seminal work, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he issued a profound warning: the gods have become diseases. The archetypal energies that humans once channeled through myth, ritual, and religion. They don't simply vanish when denied. They transform into pathology. The sexual instinct, stripped of its sacred dimension and reduced to a mere biological drive, morphs into an obsession. It becomes a compulsion. It turns into a source of unconscious identification rather than conscious participation. In this environment, the man who achieves even a basic level of psychological differentiation stands out. He stands out dramatically. His presence communicates something entirely different, something genuine, something attentive, something whole. This quality grows increasingly rare. Therefore, it becomes increasingly valuable. The desexualized mind acts as modern man's most potent weapon. It functions across multiple dimensions of your existence. First, it frees you from internal forces that have held you captive in unconscious patterns. Second, it establishes your presence as distinctive. In a world of constant reactivity, you become a still point. Third, it fundamentally transforms how others experience you, especially women. Women sense when a man's mind is no longer driven primarily by lust. The man whose awareness remains fused with sexual drive broadcasts his intentions. He doesn't need to speak them. His eyes linger too long on bodies. He fails to connect with the person within. His attention drifts during conversation. He is always searching for openings. His energy carries an unspoken demand, a demand that women exist primarily for his satisfaction. Women's bodies register this predatory quality. Their conscious minds might rationalize it away, but their nervous systems know precisely what they're dealing with. Another man who sees them as means, not as beings. Jung illuminated this dynamic through his concept of the anima. He explains how men project their inner feminine onto actual women. They see not the woman herself, they see their own unconscious content. The undifferentiated man doesn't truly see women. He sees screens for his projections. He sees vessels for his fantasies. He sees solutions for his own inner emptiness. The woman feels this projection land upon her. It's a weight. It's a reduction. It's a demand that she becomes something other than herself. But when you begin to cultivate a desexualized mind, something truly remarkable starts to happen. Women feel safe in your presence. Not because you're weak, not because you're sexless, but because they sense you see them completely. Your gaze holds steady with theirs. Your attention remains on their words, on their essence, on their being. Your energy carries no hidden agenda. The animas embrace withdrawing projections. This safety allows women to open. They open in ways they rarely can with most men. They share more freely. They express themselves more authentically. They relax into genuine connection. They are no longer vigilant against potential exploitation. This isn't because they've consciously analyzed your intentions. It's because their intuition, far more sophisticated than conscious thought, registers that they are being seen. They are not being consumed. What Jung called the process of withdrawing projections. This is precisely what is at work here. As you integrate your own anima, your inner feminine, rather than projecting it outward, you develop the profound capacity to see women as they actually are. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This deep transformation becomes possible only when projection ceases, when you stop using others as screens for your unconscious content. This process of psychological objectivity and integration is the true path to meaningful connection, not just with women, but with all aspects of life. It's a liberation, a freeing of your perception. And if you're finding resonance with these challenging, liberating truths, consider joining a community of individuals exploring similar paths of self-mastery and profound understanding. A simple click on that subscribe button below ensures you don't miss out on these deeper insights." Have you ever noticed how women seem drawn to men who aren't desperately seeking sexual validation? How they chase men who don't chase them? This isn't some clever technique. It's not a strategy. It's a natural consequence of psychological differentiation. When your consciousness isn't fixated on obtaining immediate gratification, you communicate differently. You listen fully. You respond to what is actually being said. You don't respond to what might advance your hidden agenda. The profound irony here becomes strikingly clear. By releasing the desperate grip on sexual acquisition, you become more genuinely attractive. By ceasing to treat others as means to an end, you establish authentic connection. What Jung understood, and what most men never truly grasp, is this differentiation from drives doesn't diminish your power. It dramatically enhances it. This enhanced power extends far beyond mere interpersonal dynamics. The undifferentiated mind lives in perpetual hunger. Satisfaction, when it comes, proves temporary at best. It is quickly replaced by renewed craving. The man identified with his lust never has enough. Another conquest, another experience, another fleeting validation. Yet he remains fundamentally empty. But when you break this exhausting cycle, you discover something profound. You discover contentment without acquisition. Your sense of worth no longer depends on what you can obtain. Your happiness no longer hinges on fleeting gratification. You discover that you already possess what you truly need. Transcending the inner divide. The transcendent function. This internal state aligns with what Jung termed the transcendent function. This is the psyche's innate capacity, its ability to create a third position, a position that transcends opposing forces. In the transcendent function, Jung describes this as a way of attaining liberation through one's own efforts, finding the courage to simply be oneself. The desexualized mind doesn't repress sexuality, nor does it indulge it unconsciously. It transcends the opposition between repression and indulgence. It establishes a higher unity, a unity that includes both restraint and expression, each in its proper measure. This deep contentment transforms every action you take. What previously served only your desperate need for validation now becomes genuine service to others. Your work, your relationships, your creative output, all of it shifts. It moves from self-gratification to authentic contribution, not because you've suppressed your needs, but because you've integrated them. You've integrated them within a larger, more comprehensive identity. Have you noticed how life responds differently to men who act from wholeness, rather than fragmentation? Ancient wisdom recognized this very principle. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. This operates psychologically through what Jung would recognize as synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. These aren't causally connected, but they reflect a deeper ordering principle. In synchronicity and in a causal connecting principle, Jung challenges the conventional Western division between mind and matter. He suggests that psyche and world are interconnected. They are connected in ways rationalism alone cannot explain. The desexualized mind, having achieved greater internal coherence, naturally attracts external circumstances that reflect this very coherence. Opportunities seem to appear. Relationships deepen. Work finds meaning. Not because you're manipulating reality, but because your internal coherence naturally magnetizes external coherence. You become someone people inexplicably want to help, to support, to connect with, to open doors for. People sense this integrated state. They may not intellectually understand why they trust you, why they seek your counsel, why they remember what you say, but they respond to the integrated field of energy you've established. In a world where most men remain divided against themselves, wanting peace but creating conflict, seeking connection but generating isolation, claiming virtue but acting from shadow, you become remarkable. You become remarkable simply by achieving basic psychological integration. Developing this desexualized mind doesn't mean eliminating sexuality. It doesn't mean suppressing desire. It means establishing a conscious relationship with these potent forces rather than unconscious identification with them. The sexuality of the differentiated mind is actually more powerful, more profound, more fulfilling, because it flows from wholeness, not desperation. It flows from genuine connection, not acquisition. Shadow work confronting the unseen self. The path toward this differentiated state begins with psychological objectivity, the capacity to observe your internal processes without immediately identifying with them. When sexual desire arises, you notice that desire is present. You do not become desire itself. This slight shift creates space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between feeling and action. Space where choice, genuine choice, becomes possible. This objectivity demands courage. It requires confronting your shadow, not just the shadow of sexuality, but all the disowned parts of yourself, your weaknesses, your selfishness, your dependencies. These rejected aspects don't disappear when disowned. They operate autonomously. They operate from your unconscious. They hijack your behavior. They take over when you feel most out of control. Jung's concept of the shadow stands as one of his most crucial contributions to psychology. In Individuation researches into the phenomenology of the self, he wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. The desexualized mind first requires this moral courage, the willingness to see what most men spend their lives avoiding. Jung further wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Your shadow gains its power, not from its content, but from your stubborn refusal to acknowledge it. What you resist persists, and it controls you from behind the scenes." Alongside this shadow work, the desexualized mind demands the strengthening of the conscious ego. This isn't about inflating your ego. It's about developing it sufficiently to withstand the powerful currents of the unconscious. A weak ego becomes identified with whatever psychic content is most activated. A strong ego maintains its center. It engages with these contents, but it does so without being possessed by them. As your ego strengthens and your shadow begins to integrate, something remarkable starts to emerge. The scattered fragments of your psyche, they gradually organize. They organize around a new center, not the ego, but something far more comprehensive. The self. This is the archetype of wholeness. It is the true regulating center of the psyche. The axis of the self, wholeness and individuation. Jung meticulously distinguished between the ego and the self. The ego is the center of consciousness, but the self is the center of the total psyche. This includes both conscious and unconscious dimensions. In 2 essays on analytical psychology, Jung writes, "The self is not only the center but also the whole circumference, which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness." The desexualized mind emerges through the right relationship, a right relationship between ego and self, between the limited eye of everyday awareness and the broader intelligence of the complete psyche. From this relationship with your deeper self comes inner authority. No longer do you need constant external validation, because you've connected with an inner source of value and meaning. This inner authority is the foundation of genuine confidence, not the brittle confidence of an inflated ego, but the quiet certainty, the certainty of a man who truly knows who he is. Jung wrote extensively about this profound process. He noted that the attainment of the self is nothing less than the finding of God, not God as an external deity, but the God image within, the numinous center that brings order to the psyche. The self emerges as the new organizing principle of your psychology, a center that transcends and includes the ego. As Jung explains in his seminal work, The Ego and the Unconscious, the relationship between ego and self becomes the axis around which your entire psychological life revolves. The ego no longer identifies with the contents arising from the unconscious. Instead, it establishes a living relationship with them. This is what Jung called active imagination, dialoguing with these inner figures, these inner energies, rather than being possessed by them. These are not merely theoretical concepts. The Jungian process of individuation, the process of becoming the unique individual you were meant to be, it absolutely requires this fundamental shift, this shift in psychological orientation. You cannot individuate while remaining identified with your raw libido. This energy must be differentiated. It must be directed consciously, directed toward the goal of wholeness. This journey isn't a linear one, it's cyclical. You won't achieve permanent differentiation through a single insight. You will experience moments of profound clarity. These will be followed by regressions into identification. This isn't failure. This is simply the nature of profound psychological work. Each cycle takes you deeper. Each recognition strengthens your consciousness. Jung named this cyclical nature of psychological growth the circumambulation of the self, a spiral-like movement. It repeatedly approaches the center from different angles. It is what he called the opus, the great work of psychological alchemy. In his groundbreaking text, Psychology and Alchemy, Jung demonstrates how the ancient alchemists were not merely proto-chemists. They were engaged in the very same psychological process we are discussing here. The transformation of base material, undifferentiated libido into gold. Differentiated, conscious energy. This alchemical process involves specific operations. Operations Jung identified in the symbolic language of alchemy. The nigredo, the blackening. This is the confrontation with your shadow. The albedo, the whitening. This is the emergence of new consciousness. The rubdo, the reddening. This is the reintegration of passion and instinct. But at a higher, more conscious level, the desexualized mind corresponds to this third stage, not the elimination of instinct, but its profound transformation and integration. If you are deeply drawn to understanding more about Jung's profound insights and how they relate to transforming your life, I've curated a dedicated playlist on Carl Jung. It explores these concepts in even greater detail. You can find the link in the pinned comment below this video. Go deeper. The rewards of wholeness, a life transformed. The rewards of this profound work manifest in every dimension of your life. The quality of your relationships, particularly with women. It transforms. When you are no longer using others to fulfill unconscious needs, connection becomes pure. Your work becomes more meaningful. When it flows from authentic purpose, rather than compensation for internal emptiness, it gains soul. Your entire presence in the world shifts. It moves from taking to giving, from using to serving. This shift doesn't go unnoticed. In a world drowning in sexual objectification, the man with a desexualized mind stands as a refuge of genuine human connection. People sense this difference immediately, though they rarely name it. Women especially respond to it. They find in your presence something increasingly precious, the experience of being seen for who they are, rather than for what they can provide. You become that man in the room, the one everyone inexplicably gravitates toward, not because you've learned techniques or strategies, but because you've achieved something far more fundamental: psychological differentiation. Differentiation from the drives that unconsciously control most men. This is the weapon Jung understood. This is the power of the desexualized mind. This is what sets you apart in a world designed to keep men identified, reactive, and ultimately powerless. The question isn't whether this freedom is possible. It is. The question is whether you are willing to do what is necessary to claim it as your own. Because when you develop a desexualized mind, when you free yourself from blind identification with sexual drive, you don't become less of a man. You become what few men ever achieve: a complete human being. And in that completeness lies a power that others can only sense, but never truly understand. Not until they've experienced it themselves. So I ask you, how much longer will you continue living, driven by forces you don't recognize? How much longer will you mistake your reactions for choices? How much longer will you remain fragmented when integration awaits you? The path toward the desexualized mind isn't easy. No path of true meaning ever is. But those who walk it discover something profound. They discover that what truly matters has been within reach all along. Your liberation begins with a simple shift in awareness, from blind identification to conscious relationship, from being possessed by your desires to engaging with them from a stable center, from psychological slavery to the freedom that comes only through consciousness. This shift changes everything. You change, and in that change lies the greatest power a man can possess: the power to choose his own path, to create his own meaning, to become the author rather than the subject of his own existence. And the world responds, not because you're manipulating it, but because you've aligned with a deeper truth of human existence. The truth that wholeness attracts wholeness, that consciousness creates order, that the integrated psyche naturally magnetizes corresponding circumstances. Jung captured this principle with elegant simplicity. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The desexualized mind reverses this equation. What was once fate becomes choice. What was once automatic becomes intentional. What was once driven from below now flows from above. This is the power Jung understood. This is the weapon modern man so desperately needs, yet so rarely possesses. To those who have, more will be given. This isn't mystical thinking. It's psychological reality. When your mind differentiates from constant identification with desire, you establish a field of coherence, a field that attracts what resonates with it. Opportunities, relationships, meaning, purpose, not because you're desperately seeking them, but because you've become the kind of being they naturally flow toward. Women feel this coherence instantly. They may not intellectually understand why they trust you, when they don't trust others, why they open to you, when they guard with others, why they remember your words, when others fade, but their bodies know. Their intuition knows. They are in the presence of something increasingly rare, a man who sees them rather than uses them. This is the desexualized mind, modern man's greatest weapon. In a world designed for unconsciousness, this is the freedom that awaits on the other side of differentiation. This is the power that comes, not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. The choice is yours. Remain identified and controlled by forces you refuse to recognize, or begin the journey toward psychological freedom, toward becoming the rarest and most powerful type of man alive today, one who has achieved basic differentiation. In a world drowning in unconscious identification, everything changes. When you stop being controlled by undifferentiated libido, you change, and that change isn't the end of your power. It's the beginning of a power most men never experience, the power that comes from psychological wholeness. What in this video hit you the hardest? Comment right now and let me know. Share this video with someone you think desperately needs to hear this truth.